Good evening. I am happy to call to order this subcommittee meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the purpose of our annual zoning regulations review. And present we have Mr. Hill,
Yes, present.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
myself, and the Director of Planning and Development.
Here I am. We'll see if anybody else comes in, but looks like it might be a small crowd tonight. Just for the sake of the record, a quorum is not required because we don't take any action here. We're just discussing the proposed updates, finding consensus where we can, and just moving the draft forward. So give me a second and I'll share.
I was just gonna ask what about the quorum, but you beat me
So
to it.
yeah, a quorum is only required in a meeting where you take votes because you have to have at least enough to make a majority of the commission. But a subcommittee, you can't take any action in a subcommittee. So,
Right. Okay.
all right, where's my share function? They reconfigured this. Oh, here we go. Host tools. Share. There we go. You guys have that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So on my screen, the new green stuff doesn't show up as clearly as it does on my desktop for whatever reason, the color green. But we'll go in order, including the stuff that was added as of after the last meeting. We want to try to spend at least an hour, I think, on the cannabis bit, if we can. You may have noticed when we get to that site, if you saw the updated draft, I didn't make any changes in the text itself after that because I didn't feel like we really came to any solid consensus on anything. But maybe we can firm some of that up. But just starting with definitions, new definitions added based on last week. And as always, I'll read as I'll go, and we'll pause to discuss after each little section. So based on the conversation last week or last month around potentially defining junkyards, I modified the definition of junkyard that we had last week and added one more for junk dealer based on the research that I did. So junk dealer, I added a business use matching the definition described in CGS Chapter 405, Section 21, 1A and B. Any person who engages in business as a dealer and trader in junk, old metals, scrap, rags, waste paper, or other secondhand articles that are no longer serviceable for their original manufactured purpose. Junk dealer does not mean any person who operates an automated kiosk for consumer electronics in accordance with Section 21A-446. And then modifying junkyard to add the word commercial. So junkyard, a commercial land use matching the definition, blah, 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 blah. A junkyard is not the same as an automotive salvage recycling yard, which use is separately governed by the Zoning Board of Appeals pursuant to CGS subsections 14-54 and 14-321. So the reason I added commercial as a modifier to the land use is because we did seem to go around a little bit on the difference again between a junkyard and a junkie yard, right? So that's just to clarify that a junkyard, as defined in the regulations, is only talking about a business use. And then junk dealer, at the time that I added it, it seemed like we needed to have the definition for the person or the operator as opposed to just having one for the yard. Maybe we don't really need it, but it seemed wise to me. Thoughts on that, guys?
Um, I mean, it makes sense to me. There's a logical sense to it. Um, I I have one question that, um, so does us, I don't know, I guess, is there statutory language around junkyard that we need to be careful of, or?
That is
um,
exactly what this is. This is copy paste, with the exception
Perfect.
of my addition of the, well, it's copy paste from everything after the colon.
Okay. Yeah,
All
sounds
right.
great
I
to
mean,
me.
I didn't imagine that this piece would be controversial. I will say about this whole junkyard junk dealer thing, and I think that I indicated this in my email to you guys, this turned into something a little more complicated than I thought it would be. Trying to find other sample regulations in the state that would be a good model, and also it seemed to kind of lead me down a rabbit hole of some state regulations from CT Deep that I was having trouble navigating. Um, I'm tentatively going to say I actually think we may want to punt this into next year. But based on some stuff I found yesterday, we may still have the opportunity to include it this year. So I'm just tossing that out there. And I haven't incorporated anything I found yesterday into this draft in terms of regulations for this activity. It's at the end of this document anyway, so if we don't get to it tonight, I'm not going to sweat it. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Um, I feel like I understand this, but I just want to clarify because I'm new here to make sure that I got it.
Of
So
course.
junk dealer, a business use matching the definition described in CGS chapter 405, and then this here after the colon is CGS chapter 405, section 21, 1AB, right?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, cool, got it.
And then the other definition that was added in its entirety since last time, because it came up at the last regular meeting, the commission was interested in having me explore regulations for food trucks. So the best example I found was from Windsor Locks. They had some very nice clear ones, so these are typed pretty directly from there. Instead of calling it a food truck, the construction is as a mobile food vendor, because technically they're not all in trucks. Mobile food vendor, a business which sells food and or beverages to walk-up customers from a street legal, insured, and registered vehicle or trailer, excluding truck tractors, as defined in Connecticut General Statutes 14-1, which is equipped for the safe and sanitary storage, preparation, and sale of food and or beverages. Again, this was pretty much a copy paste from the model that I found in Windsor Locks. Any thoughts here? Oh, Ray is coming in just for, make sure we see him in here. Ray, let us know when you're in. Yeah. Ray, you're in now?
Yeah, finally. The
Okay.
thing wouldn't download for me.
All right, I got you. Oh, now I've moved the stupid bar and I can't move it again.
Hi, Ray. Good to see you.
Good evening.
Okay, so you haven't missed much. I was just going over the modifications to the definitions for junkyard and the addition of one for junk dealer, and we just went over the addition of a definition for mobile food vendor to satisfy the request to explore regulations for food trucks. And then again, a modification of a definition from last time to the commercial passive storage. Based on the conversation, I added at the end of the definition, the statement, a commercial passive storage facility may include an office if that office is not open to the general public. And that seemed to be in keeping with what the commission was in favor of last time. So if there's any comments on either the mobile food vendor or modification to the commercial passive storage definition, we discuss it now, otherwise we can move on.
They both seem good to me.
All right, so, and again, the discussion of the regulations, proposed regulations for junkyards are at the very, very end, and we might not get to it today. But assuming that we continue to go in the direction that appeared to be the consensus at the last meeting, if the commission opts to permit junkyards as a use in certain districts, based on the conversation last time, this is where I think we landed, essentially prohibited in every district except the business development district. And I am suggesting that in those tables of uses, a new one, in other words, brand new junkyard on a presumably raw piece of land would be a special permit activity. And an existing facility changing ownership. And there might be some conversation that we might want to have about what does existing mean in this context, because usually it's a new use in an existing structure or a new structure, but you're not really associated with a structure in a junkyard. So we might want to discuss that at some future point. I don't think we need to talk about it tonight. But if there is an existing category, then it would be a site plan review by you guys. I think we can put a pin in that for now, but just to consider it, the only question I would ask is that in agreement with what you guys felt, that the only district where it could potentially be allowed in the future is the business development district? Anyone?
I agree with that. What, can I ask while we're on this subject, there's that, I forget the name of it, but it's obviously an existing junkyard or salvage yard on Linehouse Road, where they just put up all the new fencing, all the new walls around it.
Is that the one is that a junkyard or is that an auto salvage yard?
I'm kind of asking you that. I don't really know. I was excited to see that they built the new walls. It looked like they were going to reopen it as a legitimate business and it was going to be all cleaned up. But now it seems like it's just kind of stalled out with a bunch of walls and a bunch of junk cars behind it.
So that is actually, so I believe that is an auto salvage or auto parts recycler of some kind.
Okay.
Because that has gone in front of, unless I'm mistaken, and Joe or Alvin, if you remember differently, let me know.
You're
But I
correct.
believe that has been a ZBA issue because ZBA, for whatever reason, in the statutes, is the one that governs motor vehicles and auto salvage. And I don't deal with ZBA stuff at all. That's all Cindy, but I believe that is the case. Alvin, Joe, Ray, is that your recollection as well?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, that's what I understand is that's all gone through the ZBA. And I was kind of wondering about that over there myself. I know it looks good and all, but there's a lot of cars there without having the permits. They don't have their permits over there yet, from what I understand, and there's a lot of vehicles there. But yeah, you're correct on the auto salvage. What we were bringing up for the junkyard was more of like a recycling place.
Right, right. And that was what I thought, but I just wanted to be sure we were all on the same page. So that's a partial answer to your question, Dan, and that's something, if you want to know the status of it, you can follow up with Cindy. She took today off, so I'm not expecting her to dial in tonight either, which is fine. All right, so then moving on, again, we're at this point, because we want to save most of our time for the cannabis discussion, I think, just revisiting where we were last month, especially with a small crew. So under 14.3, earth, sand, and gravel extraction and removal, based on the conversation last week, instead of describing the excavation, removal, filling, or grading of a total amount up to 1,500 cubic yards as an exempt activity, I've added letter C. So A is the intent, B is the exemptions, and those first two exemptions would stay the same. Excavation activity associated with an existing permit, in other words, for a subdivision or a site plan. The agricultural exemption, but now C, instead of exempting excavations of less than 1,500 cubic yards from any permit, there's these three conditions. So one, let me see if I don't know why I can't move this. This is driving me nuts. Oops. For a proposed earth, sand, and/or gravel extraction and/or removal of less than 1,500 cubic yards total, which does not otherwise fall under the exemptions described in 14.3 B1 and 2 above, the applicant shall be required to apply for a zoning permit simple. Hold on, guys. I've moved this stupid. Here we go. Now I can move it. Now I can move it. 2, an applicant for an extraction removal of less than 1,500 cubic yards is advised that such activity may require additional approval by the wetlands officer or IWC. An applicant will be notified of any such requirement by the wetlands officer following the filing of the application for the zoning permit simple. And then 3, any previously approved applicant for extraction removal of less than 1,500 cubic yards who wishes to expand the activity beyond the threshold of 1,500 cubic yards shall be subject to all the requirements set forth in Chapter 275, 14.3. So those three new provisions, to me, captured what we discussed last time, which is that the problem with allowing the 1,500 cubic yards to be totally exempt is that it was causing conflict with wetlands because there was nothing to prompt the wetlands agent to check in on those. And as we know, there were some small excavations that were done under that threshold that in fact did cause wetlands problems. But as soon as the activity of filing for the zoning permit is in Permit Link, it automatically creates that prompt for wetlands. So that seemed like a reasonable way to sort of stop that friction that's been ongoing, and make us essentially aware of the activity. And I'll take your thoughts.
Well, Terry, you know that I'm already 100% on board with this.
Yeah, I like it too. Yeah.
Alvin, Ray?
I like
Oh,
what,
we have to have, well, go ahead, Alvin.
I was gonna say, I like what you've written there, Tira.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we have to have some way to cover our butts, and that seems like it'd be the way to do it, because it's not worth butting heads with the other commissions. And people should be looked at for, when you're digging close to anywhere where there's wetlands anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think this ends up, because it's been really pesty for us for a few months, and I ran this by Margaret very quickly. She seemed to like it as well. So I think that this is going to be the solution. Proof will be in the pudding. But all right, if we're happy with that, we can move on to the reason we all came here tonight. And again, I didn't incorporate anything from last time, partly because it was a small meeting, not quite as small as this one. But even in that small meeting, I didn't feel like we came to real consensus on anything. I think we had a lot of ideas that we were batting around. So everything is as it was last time with just the sidebar comments. So I'll scroll down for a second and just read where I think the questions are that we really need to resolve here, which is which districts are you allowing the use? What are the preferred dimensional standards? So that's minimum lot size, setbacks, and separation distances. I think those are the three key ones. There were some suggestions last time, but I didn't feel like anything really firm came out of it. Indoor versus outdoor grow. Jane had suggested that she believes it should always and only be indoor grow. You can certainly explore that. I will say, I think that might be impractical if one of the things that has been discussed, which is that allowing existing farmers to diversify, I'm not sure we shouldn't be allowing for some kind of outdoor grow in that circumstance, but that's up for discussion. And then, and this came more as I was considering the threshold that Ryan suggested, which was a threshold of 50 acres for an outdoor grow. When you consider that the maximum area for a micro cultivator is 10,000 square feet, and a 50-acre property is 2 million square feet, that doesn't seem like an equitable limitation unless you're also saying, yes, you can co-locate it with some other activities. So those are the questions I'm posing, and we'll go back up and we can sort of take them in order through here, or I'll just take your thoughts as we go and we can zoom around in the section. I guess if we're going in order, I guess we can start with the separation distances. Again, Jane suggested increasing what I had initially suggested as 1,000 feet between any microcultivator and any school, library, or daycare center. That would be somewhat consistent with our separation distances for liquor stores. And I have maintained, and I still fundamentally maintain, that the uses are similar. I did go into, let me expand some of these comments. I did happen to zoom around a little bit and looked at Pomfret's regulations, and their separation distance is only 500 feet. So understanding that when you increase the separation distance, you decrease the number of parcels where the thing is going to be a viable use. That's I guess what I'm asking you guys to discuss. Where do you think you want to land in there?
I personally think 1,000 feet's plenty.
That was, you said you liked 1,000?
Yes.
And Chair, I'm sorry, just to be super clear, that we are talking about micro cultivators, right? We aren't talking about retail right now.
All of this is only the micro. Oh no, I'm sorry, I take that back. This is the entire section on cannabis. The moratorium is only on micro cultivators, but we're looking at the whole section. So let me make that clear, that this is not just a separation distance for micro cultivators. This is a separation distance for any cannabis related use, but it is the micro cultivator part that is currently under moratorium.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, no, I think 1,000 feet, if that's consistent with liquor stores, is the way to go.
Ray, I see your hand up.
Yeah, it'd be real nice if the state would have pushed this, because they haven't changed nothing from last year. They still aren't handing out licenses. And it'd be nice if we knew what the state regulations were gonna be before we jumped on this. I know we have the moratorium that's, pressing time, but it's hard for us to say what we want when we don't know what the state regulations are gonna be when they open back up. There's multiple lawsuits on the state right now over this. And it's kind of hard for us to put provisions on this stuff when we don't know what the state is going to have when they do reopen up their, what they come up with, and when they reopen up the licenses. So, it's kind of hard for us to actually, we could be doing all this, we could be, and then, it all goes down the toilet by the time we're done, because everything's could be changed from, what they already have.
Well, I think that, and this is part of what I tried to do. If we go down a little lower here to number 8, the site plan for any adult use cannabis establishment shall demonstrate to the commission that it complies with all dimensional and physical requirements set forth in CGS 21A-420 as amended. That papers over a lot of what the state may change. Because if they change it as amended, that's what the applicant has to demonstrate. The separation distance, unless I am mistaken, that's something that we can decide. But let me make a note to myself to just check and make sure that separation distances are not prescribed. And I see Alvin's hand up.
Yes. Two things. It's not a state licensing. That comes after the lottery has been chosen, the lottery. That was to raise questions.
Yeah.
Lottery, not a licensing process.
Correct, but they're not doing the lottery for any micro grows until they get all their ducks in a row with that they got a not a moratorium, but like a suspension on giving the licenses out. It's actually been on for about 1.5 years now that they haven't been giving them out. They're giving them out for dispensaries and stuff, but not for the growing.
Right. Yep. And the other thing, Tira, on number 3, you've listed private school, library, or daycare center. I think I think what you're trying to say, and there's a commercial, they're all commercial daycare centers, but you have a lot of residential daycare centers versus a large establishment, like something in a school or something.
Well, that would cover both in a commercial building like the one on Route 12 or one that was in a home. Yeah. I mean, it would be any daycare center. We're not differentiating.
I would just suggest saying a non-residential daycare center.
But wouldn't you also want that separation from a residential daycare center?
Well, that's true. Good point.
Yeah, I think the point is the concentrated presence of children, regardless of whether it's a daycare center run out of a private home or out of like that strip mall one.
Yeah.
And and I was just going to say, to Ray's point, I think, when it comes to looking at the moratorium, I agree with you, Ray, that if the state hasn't issued guidelines by the time the moratorium's set to expire for the micro cultivators, then I think it might be wise for us to extend that another year until they do. But
That was
for the
my
micro
thoughts
cultivation,
exactly. That was my thoughts exactly.
Same here.
and that's why I had asked the question originally, because I think if we are looking at dispensaries, for example, or I'm sorry, adult use cannabis establishments, retail establishments, we want this separation set and in place.
Yeah, I follow your logic. I'm trying to game this out in my head. So let's assume for the sake of argument that we come to whatever decision we come to on this language, and you release the moratorium as previously planned in March, and the state is still not issuing licenses or holding the lottery for this type of use. You could, regardless of whether you move forward and give a permit, nobody's going to be able to operate anything because they can't get a license. So someone could say, I want to be ready, and I think that it might increase my chances in the lottery process if I show that I have an existing approved permit for something that I can't do yet because I don't have the license. So no activity will happen, but it's like any other time you approve a special permit, and sometimes they sit there for years before anybody gets anything done. I think that's a comparable situation. And then if I'm just trying to imagine what the consequences would be of the permit being approved and the state changing their dimensional requirements, because that's the only place you could come in conflict. I think the state makes them modify their plan. I still think I think they can't go forward unless they've demonstrated that they meet the standards regardless. Do you follow me? I don't necessarily object to extending the moratorium for a year. I just wonder, I guess I just wonder if it's necessary. If the state's not giving licenses, it doesn't matter how many of these you permit, nobody's going to build one, and they can't build one unless they meet the state requirements and our requirements.
I just hate to have something put into place with footage and everything, and then the state changes it, and our paperwork's going to say this. For even if they have to go through the state and go by the state, then our paperwork's going to say one thing, and it's going to look like we dropped the ball on, because it'll be a year or so, before we can get the real numbers put back in. And
Yeah.
it's going to almost make, I hate to say it like this, but it's going to make us look like buffoons having the wrong numbers in our regulations.
Yeah. Okay, so I have some notes for myself to check. I think it's still worth having this conversation tonight over what we think we want, because the note I'm going to drop to myself here is to follow up with the state. I mean, I've talked to them before. When I can get through to them, they are actually reasonably helpful. Although they do tend to refer to me to the long document that they've published. But I think the question that needs to be posed is, what are the consequences of the potential consequences of what's playing out in the state and any local regulations? Um,
I have two things I'd like to clarify quickly for myself here.
Let me just type this sentence, Stan, so that I don't lose my train of thought entirely. And what I'm going to ask them is if I can send them our draft based on whatever we think we want, to see if they think that there's any potential pain points. Go ahead, Dan.
Moratorium just means that there's like a freeze on our regulation, that nobody can do anything until our moratorium is lifted, correct?
Correct. It is not an actual prohibition in the sense of you can never do this, it's not an allowed use. It means for this defined period of time, we've pumped the brakes, right?
Gotcha.
And we know there are people who want the by people I mean residents, who want the microcultivator thing taken out entirely. I do not believe that that is where this commission wants to go. But that is feedback that we've had from a couple of very, very vocal people. You know, you have to take those things for what they're worth. It's one person, two people, even if it's 10 people. We live in a town of 9,200, the
Right.
vast bulk of whom are probably totally neutral to it. Some will be very in favor and some will be very against. We know that the very against always come out to speak because they're highly motivated.
Right. Okay, cool. And then the second thing I wanted to clarify is the separation, is that from the property line? 1,000
No,
feet?
no, no, and that's a great question. Because it can be very confusing. And in fact, there was one occasion where I myself got that mixed up and it caused me all kinds of grief for a good long time. Separation distance is essentially from the door of the sensitive use to the use you're describing. So it would be 1,000 feet from, or, you know, might not be the door, might be the edge of the structure, whatever. So let's use the daycare. You can't have that micro cultivate, or I think in this case, any cannabis business activity within 1,000 feet of that daycare building, regardless of the setbacks within the property,
Got you. Okay. So like
right? The
from building
distance,
to building, basically, from the.
right? The distance from the property line is called a setback. The separation distance is the amount of distance you need between certain uses.
Right. No, I knew it was, I wasn't confusing it with setback. I just didn't know if it meant like from the micro cultivator had to be 1,000 feet off the property line of the daycare center.
No, and that's actually defined in the regulations, I believe, under general provisions, it establishes, I think, what how you calculate setbacks and from center lines and stuff. I might have to double check that, but I believe it's in the general provisions. It
Okay.
doesn't, there aren't that many uses where we describe a separation distance. It's essentially this, liquor stores, and strip joints.
For good reason. Okay.
Right. And just as a point of trivia, for First Amendment reasons, you can't have an outright prohibition on adult entertainment. You can write regulations that make it virtually impossible, but you can't write regulations that make it actually impossible.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so go ahead, Ray.
Okay, for where you have that on the sidebar about, think that, you know, we're, we're not, I know I myself ain't saying right now we should do, you know, jump right in and say, you know, when the year's up that we should go another year. You know, it all depends, you know, what happens in the next couple of months, you know.
Sure, I think that's fairly well understood. I mean,
Okay, well,
it's always possible the state will get their act together. My experience with the state is that they do not move quickly. Um, but
well, with the law,
I might even be able to get an answer, even if they say it's not going to resolve within X period of time, that there might not be any downsides to us adopting these. Like they may have a sense of where they're going, I guess is
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say.
I don't think they're gonna really get a sense of where they're going until they get through the lawsuits that a lot of towns are putting on the state.
Well,
Um,
you're
I-
probably right, Ray.
but I wasn't even gonna say nothing about extending a moratorium, but then once it came up, but because it's something that's been in my mind. If they don't get things moving, I did have that on my mind. So when it came up, I definitely wanted to speak on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And to that point, um, if the state's not issuing any licenses and isn't going to be for or doing a lottery for this particular activity, for grow activities, and isn't going to be for a period of months and years, then there's also no harm to you extending the moratorium because nobody's going to get a license. So I think both things are kind of true. I think you can work on the language that you want, and you can either release it or not release it based on what's happening at the state level. If it's another year moratorium, you can still tinker with it around the edges next year. One way or the other, you have to make some kind of decision in March because that's the expiration of the first moratorium. Um, but I definitely think there's only benefit to working on the language in the meantime.
Correct. I think we would, if we plan on doing something like that, we ought to be, have our minds made up by January, I would think, or the beginning of February, because we don't want to wait till the last week to throw something else back out there.
Yeah, well, on the schedule that we discussed last time, whatever set of changes you want to bring forth uh, for that March deadline, which is really your February meeting, you've got to accept some set of updates for public hearing at your January meeting. So we've got this meeting. I think we've more or less agreed to November, December, and we're holding the possibility of January. But at the January regular meeting, so either in December or January subcommittee, you more or less have to decide whether you want to proceed with the moratorium again or propose some adjusted language, but we'll have some kind of better sense by then anyway. So do we want to talk any more about just the discrete topic of separation distances? It is a small group. We know what Jane suggested. At least a couple of those here feel that what's existing is fine. I have always thought that 1,000 feet is fine. Uh, does anybody have strong feelings that it should be up in that 2,000 foot range?
I would say
Unders-
that would depend if it was an indoor or outdoor grow. If it's an outdoor grow, I think it definitely should be further.
Okay. All right, that gives me more food for thought. Let's move on to the next dimensional issue. I wanted to go back to Alvin's suggestion about the setbacks on all sides of 750 feet. I wasn't doing the math in the meeting on the fly as we went, but I went and I calculated it the next day, and that would require a minimum parcel of almost 59 acres for a 10,000 square foot grow operation. That seemed somewhat excessive to me. And what I would suggest, and you guys discuss it, is since one of the major sticking points for folks objecting to it in the neighborhoods, as we know, has been based on odor. And the best comparable we have for something we have a large separation for based on perceived odor is swine. The setbacks on all sides for swine are 300 feet. And I'm pretty sure we calculated that that meant that the minimum parcel that you'd be able to have swine on would be 10 acres. Now that's twice the amount that I suggested, but well shy of the 50 acres that Ryan suggested. So I just wanted to toss that out to you. I'd like to get at least a little bit of conversation on each of these dimensional things so we can start to narrow it down, even if we're not coming to an actual consensus. Thoughts?
I think 50 acres is extreme and unnecessary personally. I wouldn't have a problem with the 10 acres.
With an outdoor grow, with that gentleman that came into our meeting that did he pretty much wrote the regulations for the state for THC values. And I'm pretty sure it was between him and there was another gentleman there that they were saying stuff for the outside grow. It's up to 3 miles for the odor. And so, you know, if you got a small piece of property, that's you know, a very small distance to, you know, for the odor to travel.
I don't disagree, Ray, but it's the kind of thing that I take back to, you know, we talk about what neighbors have to tolerate in terms of agricultural odors, and it is the same. I mean, I have been standing in downtown Putnam in that restaurant area, and I can smell the farms in Woodstock, right, on a day when the wind is coming down. So
But
just trying to keep. Go ahead.
There's a difference between something that's been there for 50 years and then something that just moves in my eyes. You know, there's a different, you know, like you say, buyer beware, you know it's there. But if something comes in after, you know, the houses are already there, you know, I think that's totally different. Somebody wants to put a pig farm, you know, where there never was one and there's houses around. That's totally different than somebody having one, or a cow farm, or you know, an alpaca farm, or any other kind of farm. You know, that's already there, and you know that then, you know, so be it. But to put something in somebody's neighborhood that's gonna smell them out, you know, that's not right either.
So to that point, though, Ray, if we're following that analogy, yes, we have existing farms, some of which are smaller than the dimensional requirements that we have since set. And I, as you know, absolutely agree with you. We can't be disrupting those operations because new neighbors object to existing agricultural activity. I 100% agree with you on that. However, and again, let's take this away from the cannabis thing and just talk about farming because there's some analogies here. a new person can buy a 10-acre parcel and put a pig farm on it with a 300-foot separation in the RRAD because we are a right to farm community and we have described those dimensional requirements. So the neighbor, and in fact, that use doesn't even come in front of you guys. Or it might for a site plan review, but it never comes in front of the public for a public hearing. So just on the basis of comparing agricultural uses, and I acknowledge that we're talking about cannabis not being covered by some of the agricultural state level regulations, but it is still clearly an agricultural use, right? We've been talking about it in terms of farmers wanting to diversify. If we're saying as a right to farm community that a new farmer can locate a farm which will have odors and existing neighbors really don't have any avenue to complain about that because they don't under right to farm laws, then I think it's difficult to say that we need a significantly higher threshold for this other use based just on odor. Now, you may be saying that there are other considerations, and that's fine. But the piece that is like the most compelling to me has been the odor because it's a physical result of the activity. And that's why I was using the swine as the swine farming standards as the best comparable that we have. And I'd like to hear what the others have to say about that as well. I 100% agree with you, Ray, that the other issue that has been discussed about the piggery that is in a residential neighborhood and has been there for decades and people are complaining about the smell. I am with you on that 100%. That's a buyer beware issue. But new people get to do things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
yeah.
double-edged sword. I understand what you're saying. It's definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I
And if
would
it,
agree with that as well, Tara. I just think that you have, like you said, how do you separate it? How do you tell
Yeah, you can't.
somebody that they can't come in and start a weed farm versus a pig farm? It's kind of, yeah, I agree.
and the other thing, and we've referred to this a couple of times, that if it was hemp and not cannabis, hemp has exactly the same odor or a comparable odor, but hemp is covered by capital A agriculture, and again, would never come in front of this commission. It would go to Cindy. Cindy would sign off that they've observed their setbacks for farming, which are minor, right? There wouldn't even be the 300-foot there. They could grow it pretty much right up to the property line, and nobody could say a thing because that's capital A agriculture. That's an agricultural product which emits an odor, and because it's not livestock, you guys wouldn't even have a site plan review on that. So I guess I'm trying to be very thorough in discussing the objections because I don't want issues of, I don't know how to phrase this, like perceived morality around cannabis to interfere with the realistic requirements dimensionally. And the only way I know how to get to that is talking about things that are similarly offensive that don't have the moral freight. The piggeries, the hemp. I mean, cow farms stink too. They stink just as bad as pigs, just people don't associate it with that for whatever reason. And the state sets a higher level for swine. In fact, chicken farms can be some of the worst of all. If you get right on top of them, that ammonia is terrible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And personally, I think all of it stinks worse than cannabis or hemp. I mean, just saying.
Yeah, on a personal level, I also don't mind the smell of cannabis. Maybe I would feel differently if it was constantly in my backyard, like every day. Passing
Mhm.
it on the street doesn't bother me uh, any more than my neighbor who's got a horse and on a hot summer day, it's pretty ripe around here. But I am not offended by that. I say, oh, look, there's a horse. Also, I don't mind the smell of actual skunks, so there's that.
Yep.
I don't know. Does anybody else have feelings on this? Joe, Alvin?
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to say. I mean, I think that is a a good analogy. It's an analogous conversation to have. Excuse me. And I think you know having a similar basis for those two, I think makes sense. So I think that 10 acres makes sense to me. Excuse.
Yeah, I'm totally willing to acknowledge that 5 acres might have been too small. I was trying to make the lightest changes possible in the first draft. 10 acres feels pretty good to me. Um, when we were talking about it last time, kind of like with the 750-foot setbacks, I wasn't doing the math in my head or in a calculator on the side as we were going. But then when I went to the office and I said, okay, what is the square footage of a 50-acre parcel and what is the maximum square footage of a microcultivator? Well, the microcultivator maximum square footage is 10,000 square feet and 50 acres is 2 million square feet. That just seemed, it just seemed, I couldn't justify that.
Okay,
So
now I got a different one to
maybe
throw
10
at you.
acres is too small, and I'm willing to entertain that as well, but I think 50 acres is just too high. Go ahead, Ray.
What happens when the first year it comes out, and then what happens when they go back the second year and ask for what's it the second year? I don't have my paperwork in front of me. The first year they only allow so many square feet, and then you can go up to so many square feet. I think the following year you can go back and ask for um to go bigger. So
Yes, you're right, Ray, but I think the max, so they start at 2,500 square feet. And you can increase in 2,500 square foot increments, but the cap, as I understood it and read it, is still 10,000 square feet. So you could ask for 10,000 square feet out of the box, or you could start with 2,500 square feet and you could increase up until you hit that 10,000 square foot cap. That's how I understood it. For a micro cultivator, right? Because
mhm.
that's the key here. We're not saying, and we have never said that we'll allow a cultivator, which is a cultivation on any scale up to whatever. The micro cultivators, to keep that micro label, they max
Mhm.
out at 10,000 square feet.
Okay, I know there was some like I said, I all my paperwork's in the other room on that, and I should have had it out here with me, but I was having a hard time getting on the computer itself. But I think it should be a little bit more than 10 acres myself. But like you say, somebody buys a 10-acre farm, they should be able to do what they want on it. You know, and I feel how I feel about what people should be able to do on their property, but I just don't want to see somebody come in with something like what them other people did, because that was way too small of a piece of property and too tight to the other houses. So it's something definitely got to be bigger than that.
Yeah, I think we're all more or less in agreement there. Hey, I'm just noting for the minutes that Ryan entered at 8:03. Ryan, you entered at a good time, because we're talking about some of what we discussed last month in terms of the dimensional requirements. And we were on your suggested minimum lot size of 50 acres. I don't know if you read any of the sidebar comments, but just I'll backtrack a little bit in the conversation here, for your sake. So I wasn't doing the math on it as we were discussing it last week, but a 50-acre parcel is a 2 million square foot parcel, and the maximum size for a microcultivator is 10,000 square feet. So
Yep.
that seems like a pretty grotesque mismatch. So we're trying to discuss where we think that reasonably lands.
Sure.
And
I think that the suggestion was that acreage, but only being able to use 10% of said acreage. And that would narrow down the numbers a lot. And I am aware of the 10,000. I mean, we went through that in great detail, on the last, on the last meeting when we were doing the cannabis meeting. So I do understand that, but I was saying that it would be somewhat of a limiting factor, and that would mostly be for anything other than DMRD, where you had suggested the indoor, and I thought that was also appropriate. So I think different districts should have different requirements. Like DMRD and RRD are so different in terms of what we would imagine this being. So I wouldn't suggest having those be the same. I don't think it makes any sense to have DMRD and RRAD as the same when it comes to cannabis specifically. So
yeah, and
that
I don't
was the
think
point.
we are talking, I don't think we are talking about them being the same. I think we've been trying to talk about outdoor grows
Yep.
In this conversation.
But if you
To
own
your
50 acres and you narrowed it down to 5, and you could only, that would be the 10%, and then the state regs would kick in, and you can only do up to 10,000. So that would kind of define that area, and then you may have some other facilities or other things around it that you would need to have a successful micro cultivation. That was the framework that I was suggesting, just to be clear.
I think I follow you. So let's use your model just for the sake of discussion.
Okay.
So you've got a 50-acre parcel, and you can only use, and actually let's use it in terms of square feet, because then it's more apples to apples. You've
Okay.
got 2 million square feet,
Mhm.
and by state statutes, only 10,000 of those square feet can be a microcultivator anyway.
Yes.
So if the commission decides to stay with that, and based on the conversation we have here, I think the consensus is 50 acres is still high, but let's just stick with that for now.
Okay.
If you're going to say that, then you also, I think, have to be very clear on what other uses you can co-locate on that 50 acres. Because what's absolutely unreasonable is to say, you have this 50-acre parcel, you want to put a microcultivator on it, you only get to use a quarter of an acre of your 50 acres for the activity that you want to use. Oh, but by the way, you can't do anything else. I don't think you're suggesting that, but I do think you would need to define very clearly what other uses could be co-located. Now, if you
I
guys,
agree. I agree with that. Yeah, I do agree with what you're saying about having that other uses in there, and there should be probably many things on that type of property. It wouldn't just be one use. That would just be maybe one small portion of it, right? Maybe it's I don't know, whatever you'd envision. Let's just use the farm example since that's the easiest one. So a farm could have, all kinds of other things going on with animals and all kinds of other, activities on the farm. And then a little portion of it is up to the state statute of the 10,000 as a microcultivator. And that's, that was kind of where I was going with that. I think that was clear, but I hope so.
Yeah, I think I follow your logic. Now, if we go further down, I did suggest some likely co-located uses. Obviously, other agriculture, single-family
Absolutely.
residence, because many farmers live on their parcels, right?
Absolutely.
I have suggested business professional offices, commercial passive storage, possibly R&D. Right? That's actually, I think, a reasonable thing. Somebody working in this space might also want to be doing R&D on product development.
Sure.
Distribution facilities, wholesaling, or warehousing, light manufacturing. I think those are all compatible.
Yeah.
And if if the commission chooses to stay with a large threshold parcel, I would go out of my way to articulate these things. I'll tell you where my concern still remains with the suggestion that you would consider a 50-acre parcel. By doing so, you're essentially demanding that the applicant have some other use on there. Right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's an impractical use of space.
That's part of the point. I mean, I'll just be cut to the
Right, but
chase.
I'm not totally
I am
comfortable with
directly saying that it
demanding.
shouldn't just be a lot for micro cultivator. I absolutely think that. Yeah, that is the point.
Yeah, I'm not totally comfortable with that. I'm not sure that you can make that. I'm not sure that the commission has the authority to make that determination.
I think we do if we all came to an agreement on it. I think that we have the ability to. Whether or not it's the consensus of the group is certainly not my decision, but that was the framework that I had wanted to suggest and work off of, and I'd like to hear what the other people had to say. I apologize for being late. I was caught up in Boston. I've had a big day of M&A stuff. I apologize, but I didn't catch the consensus of the group, I guess.
Well, it is a small group tonight, so much like the last month's meeting, I'm probably not going to make any quote unquote permanent changes into this section. I'm just going to keep adding sidebar comments. And before the others weigh in, I just want to be more clear about where I think you might be overstepping your authority. I do actually think that you have the legal authority to say it's a 50-acre minimum even to do this 10,000 square foot use. I don't think that's wise, but I think you do
From what I
have that.
researched, I think that we do have the legal authority because I did spend some time on it. I do think that we are within our bounds.
Yeah, let me finish my thought, Ryan.
Okay.
You do have the legal authority, even though I think it is unwise, to say 50-acre parcel, 10,000 square foot use, right? You definitely have that authority, even though I think that's an excessive use of it. Where I don't think you have the authority is to demand that somebody also have a co-located use. So I don't think that you can say that only a person, just to pluck one of these other examples off the sidebar, only a person who is already or also going to do another kind of farming can have access to a microcultivator use. That's where I think your authority falls short.
I would like to hear Rich Roberts' opinion on that case, and I'm also I'm very direct. I mean, I'm trying to avoid the scenario that we encountered last time, where a guy who has a very small parcel in the middle of Chase Road, Hill Road area wants to do a microcultivator. I am trying to avoid that scenario from ever happening again, and this was what I came up with within what I thought was within our authority. Now, whether or not I'm, right or wrong or whatnot, I would say that would be up to the attorney to tell us what we can and can't do, and I'm totally respectful of that. But
let me drop that note in
that
here.
We need to have another incident like we had last time, where it was the whole town, this one's gonna come out and have a huge issue with it. I mean, I think the town spoke very clearly, very clearly in that event.
Yeah, let me drop this note to myself in here. Ask Rich whether PZC has authority to require co-location of second use. Okay, so I've left that note to myself, Ryan, to just follow up with that. I am pretty sure that I'm correct in that, but I will be perfectly happy to discover that I'm wrong.
Thank you.
What was the, oh, I'm sorry, Ray's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see Ray's hand either. Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Ray.
Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna ask for a little update, because I wasn't here when that other case came up. So what was the size of that property? What was the big issue there? If it's not a big deal to bring me up to speed on that.
So the parcel itself was 3 acres. He had another 3-acre parcel or 2-acre parcel on the side. So the subject parcel was only 3 acres
Okay,
and is definitely in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So I will concur with Ryan. One of the reasons we went to this moratorium is that we don't want a repeat of that, wherein we're creating unnecessary friction in a neighborhood. But it seems to me that the commission doesn't want to ban the use entirely. So therefore, that's what we're discussing. What are the proper dimensions? You know, how do you allow it? Where do you allow it? And what we're concentrating on here are those dimensional issues. So we can start to narrow it down a little bit more.
I think it's worth noting too, if you guys can still hear me, that, you know, the odor was one of the big issues, and whether or not that's a, you know, a legal matter. But if you have 50 acres and you have that activity going on, the chances of the odor being an issue are significantly diminished. And that's also part of the rationale, whether, you know, right or wrong. That's a strong.
We did discuss the odor issue, and
right.
odor doesn't care about your 50 acres any more than it cares about your 5 acres.
Right, no, it's fair, but I'm saying, like, if you have 50 acres, you're less likely to have neighbors that are right next to you, that you're impeding their rights to enjoy their property, which was a big issue with the Chase Hill Road people.
Yes, we all agree on that. Go ahead, Joe. I see your hand up.
Well, I want to make sure Ray let Dan go. I want to make sure he gets a chance to speak as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Okay, well, just to let Dan know, where their grow was going to be 50 yards off of people's back deck, just for that part of it. And to get back to other uses on the 50 acres, I don't think if we did say we went with the 50 acres, I don't think we should tell anybody what they should be able to, anything that fits the regulations in that area, they should be able to do on that 50 acres besides their micro grow. You know, we shouldn't say you can only use it for this or for this or for that. They should be able to do whatever they want on, you know, whatever, you know, if they want to use it to grow, you know, for cows, if they want to, you know, if it fits that, fits the regulations, they should, like I say, they should be able to use it any way that they want, you know.
I mean, that would definitely be consistent with positions you've taken. I would say this, the reason that I suggested some uses are compatible with co-location and some aren't is I'm not sure. Well, it might be less of an issue in the RRAD because you have such a limited number of uses anyway. But in some of the other districts, I'm not sure how comfortable the commission would be, and it would be up to you to decide if it was something like super forward facing, right? Like, would you want a micro cultivator co-located with another mini golf place, right? I mean, that's an allowable use in the corridor development district. We have one there. Corridor development district is a place where we are considering also allowing micro cultivators, possibly indoor only, but maybe not indoor only. That's why I was thinking maybe you want to limit the number of the types of uses that you could co-locate. But I think your point is totally valid, which is exactly why I'm dropping it in sidebar.
And then another thing, like you brought up earlier, somebody could do the, even if it was 50 acres, they could do the limited amount of the micro grow and then grow hemp on the other 40 acres, 40 something acres, because, we have no control over that. And it'd have the same smell pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great point, Ray.
Yeah, that is a good point.
All right. Well, I will definitely take that question back to Rich because that is worth knowing. I just want to see if there's anything else that we really can make some progress on tonight before we go to talk about the food trucks thing, because I do want to leave some time for that as well.
Well, let me just, if I can, Tira.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Ryan, and no need to apologize. We've all got life going on, but part of the conversation before you did get here was right. Everyone agrees with you, right? No one wants a rehash of that application or that to be allowed, right? So there's a big difference between 3 acres and 50 acres, and I think there's probably some good ground in between there. We had been talking about 10 acres and comparing it to swine, right? Talking about the odor. I think a guiding principle, and Ray is a strong champion for this, is that we try, to balance the benefits of the town and everyone in the town while not limiting the choices people have on their property. And I think even this idea of co-locating puts a lot of limitations on some people's property. So that's my thought on that.
Hey, Joe, I have a question on that, just to be clear. Are you saying that just an absolute number is better? So like say option 1 is 50 acres with a 10% number, which effectively is 5, or an absolute 10 with no 10% restriction. So that would just be a 10-acre parcel. And that would change the dynamics towards what you're saying, which is a very good point.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ryan. And I would definitely want to consider that a little bit, but it's a good question that I don't think I can answer for you right now. I'd like to think that through.
So before we move to the food trucks thing, because I do want to give that a little discussion while it's fresh, I would like a little guidance from you guys about how to present some of this information in the next subcommittee meeting. Because I didn't add any in like the updated language in the text of this section because I didn't feel like we came to a really solid group consensus. I still don't really feel that tonight, partly because both of these meetings have been very small in comparison, right? I think we had 6 at the last one. We've got 4 or 5 here tonight. 4 of you plus me. I can keep dropping these comments in the sidebar, but I feel it's probably more useful to give you guys something in here to start to refine from. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you want to look at this without making any more changes in particular? Just what's going to be helpful for you as we consider this going forward?
I would say, my opinion would be to keep it in the sidebar until we have a more of a quorum.
Okay, so that's not like too visually confusing to have really, really long sidebar comments with just string on string on string. Because that's the only reason I guess I was concerned about it, is that it can be like visual clutter.
I think you keep a pretty good handle on that, and you know what we have going with what. Like I say, that's only my opinion, Tara. You usually keep a pretty good handle on what you have in the sidebars to where it goes, in for the regulations.
Okay.
That's
Is everybody else
that's just my opinion.
is everybody else comfortable with that? I just want it to be useful to you as I send out updates.
I'm not arguing with that, but I also agree with you, Tara. I think like if what's gonna happen is we're just gonna come back here next month and it's basically like we're starting at the same thing. We're starting the same conversation over again. Except that we've already have some sidebar comments. So where I think if you had start to make some changes, then we're headed in a direction versus just starting over again next month.
All right, so let me think this through. Let me do this. Let me accept this change, which was to delete the old number 2 because there are no caps put on it by population anymore. So I think we can pretty much agree that that's why didn't that disappear? Oh well. Well, I'll know what to do there. So let me think here. Why don't I'll keep the sidebar comments, but any place where we've got competing suggestions, for example, the minimum lot size, the setbacks, the separation distances, just essentially put those in there almost as a multiple choice option. So we'll know what's been advanced. Because I don't think we've got enough consensus for me to really make more of a change than that. Unless somebody disagrees. I'm open to suggestions here. Joseph?
Sorry, I was doing math on the back of an envelope.
I figured you might be playing with Shelley.
No, usually you hear that. I mean, I think the sidebar is helpful. It's especially helpful for people who want to follow up with the meeting who weren't here. But yes, I think as long like where changes are clear and seem to be non-controversial or non-contested, go for them. And then hold out on the ones where we're still talking.
Okay.
That's what you said, right?
Yeah, more or less. I had also suggested maybe having some multiple choice options within the text as a way to try to start to set new baselines, but maybe that's not necessary. And if you guys aren't finding the sidebar too cluttered and confusing, then I'm fine with just using it that way.
The sidebar is not confusing, Tara, and how about just like an A and a B? Like I suggested the 50 and Joe suggested the 10, and those are two very good suggestions that we could all discuss when there's a larger group. Maybe have like just an A and B instead of multiple choice, with like 5 different options, maybe just 2. That might-
Yeah, and that was where I was going, Ryan. So I'll mash some of these suggestions together, and I'll just try to be conscious to make it really legible. That's what I want. I want it to be legible for you guys as we go along. All right, so I'm gonna say, let's move on to the food trucks piece so we can start to talk about that. I don't think that there's gonna be much controversy or difficulty here. I cribbed these right from Windsor Locks. I thought they were really good. But if there's anything that you guys think are missing, this is where we want to call it out. So I would be adding to chapter 275, 14.9, which is currently food and beverage establishments, outdoor dining. I would also then add more provisions for mobile food vendors. So that would start then at letter I, because the current 14.9 is A through H. So I, individual mobile food vendors shall be permitted on private business/commercial or mixed use parcels in the DMRD, TCDD, and BDD. I'll say the words out. In the Downtown Mill Rehabilitation District, Thompson Corridor Development District, and Business Development District under the zoning permit simple level of review. J, individual mobile food vendors may be permitted on private business commercial parcels in the RRAD, CRD, TCVD, or LD under the site plan review by commission level of review. K, oops, I went too far. K, the mobile food vendor applicant shall demonstrate, that's a typo, shall demonstrate that all permits, licenses, and certifications required by the state of Connecticut, NDDH, and the Thompson Fire Marshal have been approved prior to approval by the ZEO. Failure to maintain such licenses and certifications shall be considered grounds to suspend or revoke the permit until the deficit shall be corrected. L, if the mobile food vendor is not the owner of the parcel on which the use is proposed, signed written permission from the property owner shall be required prior to approval. M, hours of operation for a mobile food vendor shall be between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. N, mobile food vendor applicants shall provide their proposed schedules, including days and hours of operation. O, the mobile food vendor location shall not impede traffic or affect traffic sightline visibility and shall not be located in or obstruct, I think that's supposed to be any handicapped accessible parking spaces or fire lanes. P, mobile food vendor applicants must provide a plan for trash collection and disposal. That should be a shall. Mobile food vendor applicants shall provide a plan for trash collection and disposal. Q, mobile food vendors associated with limited duration private events on private property, for example, providing catering at a private party on a residential or commercial property, or associated with a one-time special event for the public, shall not require a zoning permit. Such uses may still be subject to inspection by the fire marshal. The burden is on the property owner to determine any such requirements. And then R, mobile food vendors associated with a municipal event or participating in a municipally sponsored site for multiple vendors shall not require a zoning permit. Such vendors shall be subject to inspection by the fire marshal. That's what I got. And again, mostly cribbed right from Windsor Locks. I modified it a little bit here and there. I thought they were pretty good. You guys tell me what you think.
The one thing for the hours,
Mhm.
in the summertime, it doesn't get dark till almost 9 o'clock. I would think that 8 p.m. is a little early.
So how about 8 a.m. and dusk?
Even dusk is, Bogies, all the other them places are open till 10 p.m.
Ray, I had the same exact thought, and I was thinking Deary Brothers too. It's at
Yeah,
least
I would put, I myself would like to see 10 p.m. on that.
Same.
I am happy for that. Who doesn't love a late night taco truck?
Hey, guys out riding their motorcycles got to eat.
Anything else here that anybody have any comments, questions, issues with?
Alvin has his hand up.
Oh, I can only see some of it on this, the way I've got my screen set up. Go ahead, Alvin.
When I read the word mobile, that means it's moving constantly. Now, what if somebody, like say, near the school, can they leave their food vendor 24/7?
If the school gives them permission to do it.
Or
So
does it-
it's mobile in that it can be moved, right? It's not fixed to a location.
Should we put tires must stay on, or if tires are removed, they have to pay taxes on for like if it's a building?
They have to pay taxes on them anyway. That topic actually came up. We had a staff meeting today, and I don't even know why it came up. But we were talking about, I think we were talking about commercial vehicles in general. And somebody, not I, said, what about a food truck that like parks at the same lot every day for 6 months or whatever? And the assessor said that that is subject to property taxes, real property taxes.
After 60 days, I think it is, isn't it?
That I don't think he mentioned what the threshold was, but yes,
I
it
think
would.
a registered vehicle, if it comes from another, even somebody that has a company vehicle, if it's house at your house for over 60 days, you're supposed to pay taxes on it in our town.
Yeah, he did mention that. He just didn't happen to mention what the time frame was. So I don't know if it's 60 days, but I believe you. So the short answer to your question is yes, they are subject to being taxed. But that wouldn't be in the zoning regulations. We don't have intersection with telling people that they are or are not going to be taxed within the zoning regulations. Alvin, I'm not sure you were done with your thought, though.
Well, I guess what I would not like to see is to have a mobile food vendor, parked in one spot 24/7, especially in the downtown district.
That's interesting. I guess I haven't paid enough attention to the guys who have these rigs, whether they relocate them at the close of business every day or not.
Well, I know that
Boat does not. They keep it there most of the time. I think they have the option to go other places. I've seen them at a few other venues, but for the most part, they're staying there. The truck stays there as an.
I know the ones that are in Wyndham and Canterbury, they stay there, but they got to keep the tires on the vehicle so that it can be moved. But I know them two towns. I tried looking it up. They don't have much for regulations in their towns because I tried looking it up after the last our last meeting.
Yeah, I don't remember what other towns I looked at, Ray, but these were definitely the ones I thought were best. Let me see, but your point about leaving the tires on is good. Let me just see where it might make sense to stick that.
I think this all looks pretty good. The only thing that jumped out at me was the hours thing, but I don't think if they're on private property, I don't think we have the right to tell people that they have to move it off of the private property. I could see if it was town property, but being private property, we shouldn't be able to tell people what they can have parked on their property.
No, Ray, I was just thinking downtown areas, not residential areas.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but the guy at 530, he owns that property, or was it 520, 530? And that's where what's bringing this up. And I think that if the guy that owns the property there says the guy can leave it there overnight, I think he should be able to. But I can understand if it's town property, municipal property, that they should have to pull it off daily.
Let's see here. I want to drop a note in about that, that the tires shall be on it.
I think just like a mobile home, if you leave the tires on it, they're supposed to be pulled.
Yeah, yeah, I think that was a good point, Ray. And let me
Otherwise, it
just,
becomes a permanent structure.
right, and let me just drop another note in here. Possibly include a provision. No food truck. Can. No, I don't like the way that's phrased, that food trucks on municipal property must be removed at close of business.
Right.
There was, when we first started this meeting tonight, we talked a little bit about food trucks, and maybe that was something different, but.
No, it was a definition, because when you have a new term, you want to include it in the definition. So, so since Ryan wasn't here, it's actually worth going back up there.
Okay, so what I was gonna say about that is it says that it has to be registered, and there was something else. I don't know if like the tires thing should fall under that. Right, didn't it say it had to be street legal, registered? You're
Yeah,
right,
mobile
registered vehicle
food
with
vendor.
tires.
A business which sells food and or beverages to walk-up customers from a street legal, insured, and registered vehicle or trailer, excluding truck tractors, as defined in Connecticut General Statutes 14-1, which is equipped for the safe and sanitary storage, preparation, and sale of food or beverages. What I would say about that, Dan, is typically the definition is just that. It defines what it is you're talking about. And then
Okay.
the regulations are the provisions, the requirements of how they behave. So I would say that if there's going to be a requirement that the tires be on so that it can be moved, that would be in the regulations.
Okay.
Um,
That, and the one other thing I wanted to say real quick, and this is probably here nor there compared to what we're talking about in Connecticut, but I've been spending a lot of time in Texas lately, and food trucks are everywhere. Like they're in gas station parking lots, like everywhere, and they're permanently set up with like little fences and picnic tables around them. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think I think what you're describing would be possible under these regulations as written, right? If you're the owner of that gas station and you lease a space or let a guy set up on your gas station property, that's up to you. To Ray's point, that's up to you whether he stays there 24 hours a day and can have tables. Like that's all good. And I don't think anything in this language would prohibit that. I also don't think anything in this language would force that.
Got you. Okay.
To that, so to two of Dan's points, Does the definition of street legal imply that tires have to be on it?
That's what I was trying to get at, I think. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, probably. Probably.
It's definitely not street legal without tires.
Yeah. And
What if
then
it's on a sled?
if we are looking, I do think these are really good. And I don't know if you looked at Clinton, Tira, because I know at the outlets they have one of these sort of like permanent villages.
I have
Um,
been to that one, in fact. In fact, I had some of the best falafel I've had in a long time down there.
So I don't know if you checked out those as well.
I had forgotten about that when I was zooming around looking for good model ones, so I did not look at Clinton's. But I will do that. I will say I think Windsor locks are good. So unless we think they're like grotesquely wrong, I'm inclined to stick with them, but I will look at Clinton's as well. Drop that note.
Yeah, no, I don't think grotesquely wrong would be a good description. I agree with you. I think these are pretty good, and I appreciate Ray's extending for those of us who have late night munchies.
Well, I know that Ray is definitely concerned about the motorcycle rider needs. Okay, so we're about quarter of. I don't really want to talk a lot about junkyards. I just want to show you what I've drafted thus far, but I think this is going to need to be a lot more comprehensive. I'm still on the fence as to whether we're going to be able, in the time we have before we hit the March deadline, to come up with something really good for this. I think these are okay that I drafted last week. I think they could be made to work. But as I looked more on like the CT Deep website and talked to some folks there, it was really leading me down this whole rabbit hole of all the levels of approval that somebody would need to have to really run one of these businesses. And I think where we were going last week was we were thinking of like, well, we were thinking of the dumpster guy, among other things, but it seemed like people also knew of some other sort of small scale, maybe existing non-conforming junk haulers. And we were trying to make accommodations for that, which I generally agree with. But I think there's a lot more specificity of language than perhaps this stuff has captured. I will say yesterday I had a meeting, an unrelated meeting with NECOG and a couple of folks from Deep. They drove up here. They wanted to walk around the two mill sites and talk about brownfields. As a sidebar conversation, I asked Amanda Lemacher from the Brownfield group in Deep, who she thought would be a good person at Deep to talk with, because I was getting some help, but I wasn't getting like the upper level help that I wanted. She had some names she was going to hook me up with, but then Jordan from NECOG said that Plainfield had regulations concerning this use. So I printed those out and I've started reading them. I'm going to try to build something out based on those for next time. That was a long preamble to just reading what I've come up with so far and understanding that this needs a lot of work. Is there anything that flags for anyone? Because that's where I'll spend some time concentrating. So, assuming that the commission does still want to pursue the possibility of a small junk hauler / private transfer station business use, right, without being too specific on what we're calling that right now, proposing as an allowable use in the BDD only as a special permit. Well, I'll just read it then. 1, in the town of Thompson, new junkyards are only allowed in the business development district under the special permit level of review. 2, permit approval for a new operator of an existing junkyard facility, regardless of the district in which the existing facility is located, shall be under the site plan review by commission level of review. And I think what I meant to have here was an existing non-conforming. Because I was confused when I read this. So let me read that one again. Permit approval for a new operator of an existing non-conforming junkyard facility, regardless of the district in which the existing facility is located, shall be under the site plan review by commission level of review. 3, an applicant for a junkyard shall be required to have any and all applicable permits from the state of Connecticut and NDDH for the proposed use prior to initiating the use. 4, the PZC may approve the permit for the use conditionally if the applicant demonstrates to the satisfaction of the commission that all required applications have been filed with the state of Connecticut and NDDH and are awaiting approval. In the case of a conditional approval, the use shall not commence until the applicant is able to demonstrate that all such approvals are in hand. 5, buffer requirements for non-commercial uses. When a proposed junkyard abuts a non-commercial use, for example, residential or agricultural, the commission shall impose the additional 50-foot buffer area described in Chapter 275, Section 10.3E. I know this is all new content, and I've just said that I need to do more with it, but just based on this skeleton, does this start to match what you guys had in mind? Anyone?
Well, I guess I'll be first. Me and my mouth, but we got to start somewhere. So I would have to say that it does look pretty good. There was one spot where where you were reading about the permits. I don't think that anybody should be able to put an application in unless they already have their permits from the state.
So maybe not this number 4 where you could have a conditional.
Correct. That they should have to have all their permits before they even, because once they fill out the application, we're kind of held over a barrel to, if we went to change something in between,
So licenses in hand at point of application.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. I think that's reasonable.
That's my opinion anyway.
Anybody else, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that's sound and reasonable, right?
I think that sounds reasonable too. I just want to clarify something. Like, is it possible that somebody could go get their permits from the Connecticut and NDDH and then come to us and we say no?
Yes, but the only reason the commission can say no is if the application isn't legal. So let's assume for one moment that whatever licensing they need from the state and NDDH doesn't happen to include anything about setbacks or buffers, right? That's where your authority is how the use sits on the land. So you could deny an application because the site plan didn't conform to the regulations But in that case, all the applicant has to do is submit a correct application later. So in other words, it's not prejudicial if you deny it. It
Okay.
just means get it right. Now, having said that, if something's coming to you for a special permit consideration, at very least Cindy, and depending on the type of use, Cindy and I, or Cindy and Meg at least, are looking at this, and if they see something that's not legal, they're going to tell the applicant, presumably, before it gets to you. Right? So the point being, if staff is doing their job, whether it's just Cindy, Cindy and Meg, Cindy, Meg and me, part of our job is an applicant brings us something and we look at it with our different hats on and say, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem. So if we're doing our job, by the time it gets to you guys, all you guys should be doing is approving it because we've already determined that it's legal. You can modify it, and that's especially relevant in a special permit case. And that's why the public gets to have their say. It's very rare that the public brings forward something that you can act on in a factual sense. They tend to come in with things that are kind of like, well, I've heard that, as we sort of say, oh, the children, oh, oh, the traffic, right? But sometimes you can derive something from that is fact-based and within your authority, and you can modify an application. That's the purpose of the public input. Sometimes an applicant will bring forward an application and they will ignore the advice of staff, and they do it anyway. And in that case, yes, you should be denying if Cindy or I says, well, they insisted on bringing this to you, but we think this is a problem. That would be the only case that something would be reviewed by us and you would be in a position to have to deny it.
Okay. Yeah, and it also makes sense to me after hearing this that somebody could presumably come in and talk to Cindy and say, hey, before I go to the state, I just want to know, would I be allowed to do this? And I'm not necessarily putting in an application, but I just want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time to go apply for the state and the NDDH permits.
Yes, and technically we can't say the commission will approve this, even though we know if it's a legal application, the application has to be approved. Technically, we cannot tell an applicant what the commission will do. It's a little balancing act. But it is totally reasonable for an applicant to come in and say, I just want to be sure that I'm on the right track. And the other thing that an applicant can do is they can come for the informal meeting with the commission before they make an application and say, I want to do this, and you can identify some potential pitfalls. We encourage applicants to do that. So there are a couple of ways where you could head off an applicant going to the expense of pulling licenses and permits and then coming in and saying, oh, well, I didn't know, we've got multiple ways to stop that from happening.
Thanks for clarifying all that. I just wanted to make sure that somebody wouldn't be set up into a position where they're jumping through all these hoops with the state and NDDH, and then they actually can't do it anyway. That's awesome.
In Thompson, we really tried to avoid that. I will tell you that I am aware that there have been in many towns, many states, many places, much more laissez-faire departments where they feel that it is not their business to give a lot of input to the applicant, that they're just there to process. And that to me is really dumb because it puts people in exactly the position that you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
It
it's
looks good.
3. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something else, Dan?
I was just saying, other than that, I think that all looks good.
Okay. It's 3 minutes of 9. I want to say one thing before we wrap, which is this is Alvin's last subcommittee meeting, and I think you should all acknowledge him.
Tira, thank you. I was going to say the same thing.
Oh, I didn't mean to steal your thunder,
No, it's
Chairperson.
fine. I appreciate it. I appreciate you bringing it up. And Alvin, I can speak for myself, and I hope for others when I say the level of thought and attention to detail that you have brought specifically to these subcommittee meetings. And we'll talk more at the regular meeting, but it has been tremendously appreciated by me.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure and a privilege, Alvin.
Well, it's been interesting for me as well.
Yeah, Alvin, thank you for all your input that you've been doing and all the paperwork that you've given us. And you've taught me a lot in the 4 years that I've been on. And I thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
I gotta say, I don't think you and I have ever actually even met and shook hands. I've seen you at a couple meetings in person and now a couple meetings here, but thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Last chance for any comments before I wrap it, guys.
Hearing none, I will entertain. Well, before I entertain a motion, I just want to say to everyone, thank you. This was a small group tonight, but mighty, and a lot of thoughtful comments and good discussion. I truly find these subcommittee meetings so important, and I'm always really pleased at the end of them. So thanks to everyone who is here tonight for your work. And with
Thanks,
that,
everybody.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Alvin, I think you should make the motion.
Indeed. Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great night.
I'll do my best to get a new draft to you tomorrow, early next week at the latest.
Thanks.